Are we trading our minds for speed? In a world rushing forward at full throttle, have you noticed what's being left behind? Our depth, our patience, our capacity to think critically quietly slipping through our fingers as speed becomes the only currency that matters. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this crucial message. More people need to wake up to what's really happening. Have you ever sat down with an older person? The kind who read entire books from cover to cover, calculated numbers in their head without reaching for a phone, and listened, not just waited for their turn to speak, but truly listened. Their presence was steady, focused, and rooted in reflection. Now, take a look around. Today's conversations are a whirlwind of distractions. Attention spans barely stretch past 5 minutes. Responses come in the form of emojis. People bounce from one video to the next, pinging from one notification to another like human pinballs. The contrast is almost painful. Decades ago, deep thinking was a sign of virtue. Now it feels like a burden. Reading is seen as a chore, reflecting, exhausting, debating, or discussing. Too much effort. We have exchanged depth for speed, culture for clicks, knowledge for dopamine. The saddest part. Most people don't even realize it. They think this is just how life is, that it's normal, that it's progress. But in truth, we are living through a silent epidemic, a slow, creeping fog of collective dumbs. It wasn't just a sudden shift, but 2016 marked a point of no return. That year wasn't only about acceleration, it was the year when everything began to lose meaning. It was the tipping point when things didn't just get faster, but shallower. TikTok exploded onto the scene. Screen addiction morphed from concern to commonplace. And it's precisely around this time that the curve of human intelligence began to show signs of decline. In this video, we'll take a closer look at how the world that once nurtured inventors, philosophers, and visionaries is quietly fading away. And how, despite the marvels of modern technology, our generation is becoming the most distracted, the most vulnerable, and dare we say the least intelligent in modern history. A turning point. The beginning of something nearly invisible, yet deeply transformative. A revolution in how we consume information, and even worse, in how we process thoughts. TikTok entered not just as an app, but as a force designed to command your attention with short looping bursts. Not long after, Instagram followed, evolving from a simple photo-sharing platform into a dopamine delivery system. Stories, reels, autoplay, videos, faster, louder, brighter, more addictive. Like children loose in a candy store, we didn't resist. We indulged. But here's the unsettling truth. The apps aren't inherently evil. The danger lies in their design. Every element is engineered to capture your attention and keep it. Endless scroll, the auto-playing sounds, the full-screen immersion. The like button placed just right, none of it is by accident. These features are the result of psychological studies, behavior mapping, and endless A/B testing. These platforms figured out that giving users a steady stream of instant visual and audio rewards would trap them just like lab rats chasing sugar pellets. But unlike the rats, we don't stop when we're full. We keep going, trapped in a cycle that rewards short attention, but punishes deep thought. Every 10-second video you consume floods your brain with dopamine, but over time, it numbs you. Suddenly, the simple joys reading a 300-page book, watching a 1-hour documentary, or even having a meaningful conversation without glancing at your phone feel like monumental tasks. We are in a vicious cycle. And the worst part? Most of us don't even see it. Depth for speed. Culture for clicks. Knowledge for dopamine. 2016. The breaking point. Collective dumbness. A revolution in how we consume information. And worse, in how we think. Everything starts to seem boring. Everything starts to seem boring, monotonous, empty. But here's the cruelest part. It's not just about entertainment anymore. This shift is reaching something far more serious. It's invading our ability to think, to reflect deeply, to generate original thoughts. Our attention is no longer whole. It's fragmented, scattered, and as it breaks apart, so does our intelligence. Have you ever caught yourself reading a page only to realize you absorbed none of it, or tried to complete a simple task? yet felt an almost uncontrollable urge to check your phone every few minutes? This isn't just about discipline or willpower. This is a side effect, a neurological response. We are being conditioned by our environment, slowly but powerfully, rewired to crave distraction over focus. Studies conducted in recent years have revealed a disturbing truth. Since 2016, the average IQ in developed countries has begun to decline. For the first time in modern history, this decline is not limited to classroom performance or test scores. It goes far deeper to our capacity for logical reasoning, memory retention, sustained focus, and reading comprehension. Take Norway, for instance. A comprehensive study there showed that individuals born after 1995 scored, on average, 7 IQ points lower than their parents. 7 points may not sound like much, but in cognitive terms, it's significant. It's the gap between grasping a sophisticated argument and struggling to follow even a basic one. Can you imagine what that means on a global scale? But let's ask the uncomfortable question. Is it only the app's fault? Not entirely. The hard truth is, we're complicit. We allowed this trade to happen: wisdom for entertainment, depth for speed, and the mental discipline of deep thinking for a constant. A stream of digital distraction. How often do you click on a YouTube video and skip to the next before it's even halfway through? Or try to read something meaningful, only to interrupt yourself before the second paragraph with a quick glance at WhatsApp? When was the last time you had a long, uninterrupted conversation, one that didn't include someone checking their phone? Our parents wrote thoughtful letters. They read entire books. They debated politics and philosophy over coffee tables and dinner conversations. And us? We mimic dances and wear that as a badge of cultural identity. It's uncomfortable to admit, but necessary. We are more distracted, more anxious, more dependent, and undeniably less intelligent. Not because we lack potential, but because we no longer use that potential. We are quite literally trading our brains for clicks. And what's truly terrifying is that we don't see anything wrong with it. We've normalized this mental decline. So if you feel that your thoughts are slower, your attention more fragmented, your mind somehow ... Lord, you're not imagining. It's real. It's measurable. It's happening to millions. But here's the hopeful part. There is still time. There's still a way back. But it won't be easy. To regain your mind, you'll have to swim against the current. You'll need to consciously reject the algorithm's temptations. You'll have to do what has become increasingly rare. Pause. Think. Reflect. Believe it or not, there was a time when human intelligence was at its peak. Not in the digital age, but in the 1970s, yes, the golden age of intelligence. If you were born after the 90s, this may sound like a fairy tale, but it was real. People knew how to wait. They knew how to concentrate, how to debate, how to memorize. And above all, how to think clearly. And it wasn't because life was easier. Back then, quite the opposite. The human mind hadn't yet been hijacked by artificial stimuli and instant gratification. It was a time when intellect and culture worked in harmony. In classrooms, teachers didn't need to shout to command authority. They earned it through respect. We are trading our brains for clicks, and most frighteningly, we think it's normal. If you feel your mind is slower, it's not your imagination, it's real. The golden age of intelligence was in the 1970s. People knew how to wait, concentrate, argue, memorize, and think. Students listened, took notes, and reflected. Students listened, took notes, and reflected. These weren't passive actions. They were central to how knowledge was truly absorbed. Teaching was not about entertainment. It was demanding, even intense. At times, but those who pushed through the challenge walked away with something priceless: autonomy of thought, the ability to think independently, to form judgments, to reason. Books in that world were far more than classroom tools. They were portals, doorways to entire worlds, complex ideas, and human emotions. Young minds didn't settle for summaries or quotes on social media. They immersed themselves in authors like Camus, Nietzsche, Enrico, Verissimo, and Graciliano Ramos. These names weren't intimidating, they were familiar. The rhythm of life was different. Slower, yes, but richer. Back then, no one cared how long a video lasted because there were no videos. There were only pages, and the stories they told. The journey itself was the pleasure. No skipping to the end, no dopamine rush after 5 seconds. Just the joy of getting lost in a long paragraph, turning one page after another, with no distractions. A 15-year-old from that era could confidently recite Shakespeare, understand the logic of algebra, and reflect on philosophy with surprising maturity. Compare that to today, where many teenagers can't interpret a simple paragraph without asking ChatGPT what it means. That's not arrogance. That's the reality we live in. Culture had a different kind of power then. It wasn't built on shallow stimuli. There were magazines like Super Interesting and Sunday newspapers that dedicated entire page. Yes, full pages too deep, well-argued essays. Radios broadcasted long interviews that unfolded at a human pace, with no jump cuts, no background music trying to hold your attention, just ideas. Thoughtfully expressed, and the most incredible part, people listened, they read, they reflected, and then they discussed. Can you imagine today's primetime television airing a 40-minute interview with a philosopher, calmly discussing the meaning of life? It would probably be dismissed within seconds, called boring, too slow, or too difficult. But in the 1970s, this kind of content was not only accepted, it was commonplace, it was natural, it was deeply productive. There's another crucial detail we often overlook. Silence was respected. It wasn't strange for someone to sit quietly on a park bench, alone with their thoughts, watching, reflecting, observing the world. That silence wasn't a void. It was fertile ground. Today, silence makes us uncomfortable. We rush to fill every moment with music, scrolling, or pointless chatter. If the mere act of being alone with our minds has become unbearable, what shaped this golden intellectual era? Two forces: concentration and scarcity. When external stimuli were limited, the brain turned inward. It created, it imagined. It filled the silence with thoughts, questions, and stories. Before the internet, boredom wasn't an enemy, it was the birthplace of ideas, and concentration was the foundation of all meaningful learning. Reading long texts, watching full-length documentaries, sitting through an entire class without reaching for a screen, this wasn't heroic. It was just normal. From this soil, this quiet, focused, creative space, emerged the minds that shaped the modern world. Scientists, engineers, philosophers, artists, many of the people who built the technologies we depend on today were raised. In that world, a world where logic, rhetoric, and history were taught not in bite-sized fragments, but with depth and discipline. And that's exactly why the gap between that generation and ours feels so stark. This isn't cheap nostalgia. It's not about glorifying the past for its own sake. It's an objective comparison. While they read 30 books a year, today's average is less than 2. Autonomy of thought. Books were not just school tools. They were portals. The gap between that generation and ours is so shocking. This isn't cheap nostalgia. It's an objective comparison. While they wrote letters, diaries, and deep essays, carefully composed deep essays, we now express ourselves with emojis, acronyms, and auto-responses. What once required thought now demands only a few taps. Speed replaced depth, ease killed effort, and the result? It's not just disappointing, it's cruel. We are crafting a generation that has access to all the knowledge in the world, yet lacks the mental structure to truly absorb or apply it. Imagine having a vast library at your fingertips, but no idea how to read. That's the paradox we live in today. The real difference between a young person in 1971 and one today isn't raw intelligence. It's not that we are less capable. It's that we've lost something far more fragile: the quality of attention. They had time. They had focus. They had silence, the kind that allows ideas to grow layer by layer. We, in contrast, have technology distraction and anxiety pressing in from all sides. And let's be honest, that was a terrible trade. It's looking back at that golden age of intelligence. The point isn't to romanticize the past or wish for time travel. It's about understanding with clear eyes what we are losing and, even more importantly, what we still have a chance to recover. Concentration, critical thinking, the joy of reading, the kind of deep curiosity that isn't satisfied by scrolling. If the 20th century taught us to think, it seems the 21st is bent on teaching us to forget. The digital revolution and the distracted mind from 2000 to 2016. The digital revolution didn't just accelerate, it exploded. If the 1980s and 90s were the warm-up, the 2000s arrived like a stampede. The internet, once a curiosity, became a necessity, a place, not just a visit, but where our very minds began to live. But live isn't always the right word. For many, thinking turned into an act of survival, navigating through a dense jungle of noise, alerts, messages, and endless feeds. Think about it. Facebook was born in 2004, YouTube in 2005, the iPhone. In 2007, each new invention brought us closer to the world, but pushed us further from our own minds. Information was suddenly everywhere, accessible at any time, in any place. But along with that gift came a curse, addiction, anxiety, and a noticeable collapse in cognitive clarity. The promise sounded amazing, the world at your fingertips. But the reality? The more access we had, the less depth we maintained. Previously, if you wanted to learn, you had to seek, you had to study, question, discuss, or spend hours turning the pages of books and journals. Today, everything is handed to us, shoot up, simplified, and reduced to 2-minute videos or infographic reels. But here's the issue. No one ever taught us how to cope with this flood of content. Our minds were dropped into an ocean of information without a life vest, without a compass, without a map. Meanwhile, social media evolved rapidly. Platforms that once encouraged messaging or personal blogs became tools of instant dopamine. Orkut became Facebook, MSN became WhatsApp. With every upgrade, attention spans shrank. A Microsoft study even revealed that by 2015, the average adult attention span had dropped to just 8 seconds, less than a goldfish. Yes, really. A fish pays more attention than most connected humans today. Why? Because these platforms were never designed to inform. They were engineered to capture your attention at any cost. The infinite scroll, autoplay videos, vibrant notifications, they're not neutral features. They're calculated moves in a psychological casino. You are the currency. As the years passed, the consequences started to show. Research began pointing to a worrying drop in cognitive performance. Students began scoring worse on exams that required logic, critical thinking, reading comprehension, and even basic attention. Our brains, once able to focus for long stretches, now operate in a new, dysfunctional mode, continuous partial attention. A state where we are never fully present, not in a class, not in a book, not even in conversation. While they wrote letters, diaries, and deep essays, we communicate with emojis, acronyms, and auto-responses. A state where you're never 100% present. In anything. Have you tried reading an article and checked your phone 5 times before finishing the first paragraph? Have you ever sat down to read a simple article only to find yourself instinctively reaching for your phone 5 times before even completing the first paragraph? Tried to study, but couldn't get past the first page, and ended up searching for a summary video because your mind just wouldn't settle. Or perhaps you've picked up your phone to do something, and seconds later, completely forgotten what it was. This isn't a sign of laziness or personal failure. It's design, intentional, calculated, and profit-driven. It was precisely during this period that the true face of the tech industry's business model became crystal clear. The more time you spend staring at a screen, the more they earn. And to achieve this, they didn't just create entertaining apps. They developed addictive systems. Designed to exploit your brain's chemistry, they invested in studying how to manipulate attention through intermittent rewards, randomized notifications, and dopamine-triggering feedback loops. It's not just technology, it's behavioral engineering, and the change in content reflected this shift. Deep learning was replaced by performative snippets. Videos became shorter, faster. Texts were trimmed down to surface-level blurbs. Everything turned into top 5 lists, 3-minute hacks, or quick tips designed not to inform, but to grab and hold you just long enough before the next distraction. The secret no one told you is this: these systems are not designed to educate, but to hook. The consequence is not just cultural, it's neurological. We're witnessing the rise of anxious, overstimulated brains that can no longer hold on to long chains of reasoning. Young people bounce from clip to clip, video to video, unable to follow a structured argument or develop original thoughts. Adults can hardly maintain a focused conversation without checking their phones under the table. Professionals read detailed reports the same way they scroll through tweets skimmed. Rushed, barely retained. And the saddest part? We've renamed this dysfunction as multitasking, pretending it's a skill or a badge of productivity. But it's not. It's a trap. The human brain was never designed to perform multiple complex tasks at once. What it actually does is switch rapidly between them, which only results in mental fatigue, mistakes, and a sharp drop in efficiency. What many call being productive is often just chronic stress wearing a mask. From 2000 to 2016, our intelligence, once trained like a muscle, was no longer strengthened. Instead, it was overwhelmed by a tsunami of digital stimuli. Every ping, every alert, every like interrupted the natural rhythm of thought. With every feed refresh, the mind's focus was reset. The result? A fragmented cognitive state where attention came in broken pieces rather than sustained streams. And this fragmentation didn't just impact intellect, it hit us emotionally too. A mind that can't focus makes more mistakes. It becomes more anxious, more distracted, more frustrated. The result is a subtle but growing sense of insecurity, mental fatigue, and loneliness. A distracted mind is not just less intelligent, it's also more isolated. Even surrounded by screens, we feel disconnected. Even with constant input, we feel empty. The noise became louder than the warnings, and yes, there were warnings. Philosophers, neuroscientists, teachers, they began to sound the alarm. They spoke of a coming collapse, a thinning of attention, a loss of cognitive depth. But who was listening? The scroll kept going. Algorithms were already in charge. By the time arrived in 2016, the signs were no longer subtle. The collapse had already been announced. This was the era when the mind stopped being the center, the sacred seat of thought. Memory, imagination, instead became just another product, another unit to be optimized, harvested, and monetized. But here's what matters most. This cycle can be broken. It's not irreversible. It's not your fault. More importantly, it's not your fate. Because the human brain is plastic, it adapts, it learns, it heals. If you become aware of how this system works, if you see the invisible strings, then you can begin to cut them. But the first step, you must accept a difficult truth. You were manipulated. We were manipulated by companies that figured out how to transform distraction into profit, and who sold us the illusion that being constantly connected meant being truly present. It's not a digital revolution that expanded our minds, but fragmented what we had. Let's be clear, it was never about unlocking human potential. What we witnessed over the past few decades wasn't a cognitive leap forward. It was a slow, silent disassembly. A revolution, yes, but not one that expanded our awareness. It fractured it. This isn't some conspiracy theory born in dark corners of the internet. It's a sober, uncomfortable portrait of the reality we live in every day. In just a few decades, we transitioned from being a generation that valued intellect, saw books as companions, discussions as sport, and boredom as a spark for imagination, into one that dreads stillness. One that replaces the quiet pleasure of reading with the restless thrill of scrolling. That prefers to appear intelligent rather than be intelligent. And the most painful part, we got used to it. It became our normal. The generation of the 1970s, though equipped with far fewer resources and tools, seemed to think more deeply, feel more sincerely, and engage in debate with richer layers of thought. Today, surrounded by more technology than ever imagined, many stumble over simple phrases, get lost in short texts, and drown in distractions disguised as knowledge. Yes, it's humiliating. But more importantly, it's a call to action, because what distraction has dismantled, discipline can rebuild. It's not too late. You can regain control of your mind. No, it won't be easy, but then again, nothing meaningful ever is. What awaits, however, is liberation, the quiet kind that builds confidence one moment of focus at a time. Start small. Uninstall just one app, the one that robs you of hours without giving anything back. Pick up a book and commit to reading. Just a single page each day, but do it with your full presence. Have one conversation without the pull of your phone. Invite boredom back into your life, not as a threat, but as fertile ground from which imagination grows. Rebuild your mind like a sacred temple, slowly, respectfully, with time, silence, and purpose. Because what we are losing isn't just concentration. It's our identity, our autonomy, the ability to live with depth in a world that increasingly encourages shallowness. And this must stop. Dash now if this message resonated with you. Don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, like, and share. Not for the numbers, but so others might awaken to the same quiet urgency. Because the future of our minds, our relationships, our humanity depends on what we do next. Remember, reality doesn't adapt to those who ignore it. The time to change is now. Because when we lose depth, we lose the very core of what it means to be human. Are you ready to reclaim your mind? See you in the next video.